We'll have a few stragglers come in, but I didn't want to delay much longer. I see that Ben Eldridge is here, and he's going to be our first speaker after we have an opportunity for public comment. So that puts us in a position to move forward and try to use everyone's time wisely. We'll be having a couple of presentations today that will be significant. We'll have some question and answer associated with those. So I want to leave as much time for that as possible. Before I begin, is there anyone who has something they'd like to say to the committee, would like to offer up public comment at this point in time? And Barrett, I'm going to ask you to keep an eye for that because I can't see the screen. Who might be asking to speak?
Yes, sir. This is Denise Deaver.
I'm sorry, say your name again.
Denise.
Oh, Denise. Sorry, Denise. I apologize. I couldn't hear you. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for posting the survey on the city's website. I didn't see the agenda posted though. Really like to see that if we could. In addition to that, have we made a decision about whether or not this Zoom meeting is going to actually be archived, saved?
Barrett, it's being recorded? Is it being archived?
It's being recorded.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm not sure how it's being distributed, but
I think we can post it. It's my understanding. Is that right, Jeff?
yeah, it's recorded. We put it on the website.
Okay. I think that's the plan, is to put it on the website. Let's do it.
Okay, thank you, because you're pretty skinny out there with minutes and Zoom meeting recordings. So for this committee's archival history of what's been accomplished, not a lot for the public to see. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Deaver. Anyone else like to make public comment? I don't see anyone. Barrett, All right. Let's just go ahead and jump into it. Subcommittee reports. Ben, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. So, yeah, bear with me. I'm literally almost at City Hall, but yeah. So, from the data subcommittee side of things, yeah, we released that survey. I actually don't have the latest count. As of about a week ago, is at about 250, and that was after the first week's sharing. It's gone out mostly through social media. I know some people have sent it to their private networks by email. And I asked, it went out through the city's website, Boerne Area Informed Citizens, Kendall County Town Hall, what was the other one? I think Boerne to Bergheim Coalition, and then Boerne Protect Our Hills. Those are all Facebook groups. And then I asked one of my colleagues to send it out to some people that she knows. She has a whole sort of contact list to get it around, encourage everybody to share it as far and wide as possible. I believe the Chamber of Commerce also encouraged one of their staff members to share it around, though I never saw that Facebook post. I never hunted it down. And so long story short, we're still waiting to get, we were gonna wait till the end of this week. And then next week, I'm actually circling up with the team from Duke University and the University of Texas to look at the data. We will make that data 100% publicly available. But the Duke people want to look at it first and just sort of make sure they're understanding it before they provide any of their interpretation on the raw data. One of the advantages I want to remind everyone is of having that independent resource of Duke is honestly, like, I'm not driving that bus. There's nobody really with a real agenda other than on their side. They want to know what the public wants, period. And so, I know there's a lot of sensitivity about water and who's driving the bus, so to speak, but the idea is to kind of have that third party that doesn't have a real vested interest in the outcomes here. And I'm trying to think the last thing. So then the other thing too that I've heard in terms of criticism on that survey was that the question about development, essentially, are we concerned about how water impacts development? People were saying, well, it cuts both ways. Some people, obviously don't want to see more development, but others might want to see it. But that question doesn't really answer which side of that equation you're on. The Duke folks, I reached out to them and they said, well, for their purposes, it's just more of a data point, so they know that that is a concern broadly speaking, and not in terms of how to interpret that concern, but that it's something that maybe needs to be factored into our data dashboard, is kind of how it affects development. But as far as our committee going forward, we may not be able to make conclusions about how the public wants to see water, whether they want to see it being a constraint on growth, or resolved in a way that allows unfettered growth. That's not really effectively answered by that question from what people are saying to me. I think that's about it. I welcome any questions. I just pulled up, but I think I'm going to stay in the car until I can answer any questions anybody may have.
And I just had one question, and it's more of a summary. Did I understand you correctly that as of March 26th, you expect to have the results published, the survey results?
I think we could, yes, I think we could hit that deadline. Again, we're meeting next week. No, I'm sorry, we're meeting later this week, Thursday. So yeah, I think that's probably viable. I'll talk to the team about that. It's really on the Duke folks to produce that for us. And I don't know if there's any complexities they have to manage or if they can just shove it out there. So.
Okay. What comes next? Just forecasting down the road for the Internet of Water project. What do we need to be planning for, and how can we help?
Well, so the Duke team has been very hungry for this data because they really are going to build the dashboard based on it. And so they'll get to work on things, but the one thing that we will definitely need to deliver on, as we've spoken about previously, is acquiring data from the other municipalities, the WCIDs and the MUDs. I know a letter was sent out, signed by the mayor and the judge, asking for that data, or basically letting them know we're going to be seeking that data. But I hope that we'll be able to deliver that data to them, because obviously they can't build much of a dashboard if it's an incomplete picture. It doesn't help us a lot. So I think that's one of the things. Yeah, well, I guess the other thing too I'll share, by the way, is I'm now on a Texas Water Development Board data committee. It's a statewide committee, and I was actually surprised. I didn't realize it, but Ashley from Duke is also on that committee because she's working with the state to develop an Internet of Water. And Ashley made the point that ours will be the first municipality in the country, or region, sub-region in the country, to have its own Internet of Water. So it's pretty neat that that's happening here. And the idea is to then, as we've said previously, but the idea is to promote it across the state. And that's kind of the role that we're playing on this water data committee for the state. So again, that gets back to us being a model city here.
All right, well, we'll make a point to follow up with various sources that the mayor and the county judge have reached out to see if we can get a status update. Be in a position to report back on that hopefully before too long. But like I said, those letters have been out. I suspect that it's not been the highest priority in light of our recent weather and COVID stuff, but we'll see if we can plan to reminder seed and expedite responses.
Right, and well, I did want to say we did try to get that survey out much sooner, but we ran into two things. One was COVID shots was the priority in the week when we tried to get it out, and then the freeze hit, and then it was COVID shots round two. So it did take longer for us to get that survey out than we intended. So that's just something to note. Otherwise, we would have had it out a lot sooner.
All right. Well, thank you for your continued effort on that. We appreciate it. Anything else for the good of the order before we circulate for questions? Anyone have any questions for Ben or thoughts that are relevant to this topic? Nope. Okay. Mr. Bailey, good to see you. Can you give us an update on the legislative agenda?
I believe I've got some. Let me pass it on. There are 3 documents that I've sent. There are 2 or 3 more that will be forthcoming right after our call. The first is a listing of the committees: land and resource, energy resources, and natural resources. And it's a listing of bills that have already been referred to those committees. It lists the bill number and then a synopsis or caption of what is covered in that bill. So I thought that might be of interest to those on the committee and also to the city of Boerne. In addition to that, there are three particular bills that I wish to address. Two associated with what we're calling land development / housing density bills. There are two where we've been working with the Kendall County commissioners and other commissioners, and I'll talk about that. And then the other bill that I'll start off with is what we call House Bill 4341, which has to do with the aggregate production operation program. And in this bill, we are recommending the complete, I repeat, the complete transfer of the APO program, that's the acronym for Aggregate Production Operation, from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to the Texas Railroad Commission. So we've met with senior people in the agencies, and not saying that we have full agreement, but we believe that it's best for the state of Texas to move this program. So it's not a portion of it. It's not just a single office. This is the entire APO program from the TCEQ to the Railroad Commission. So that's in Bill 4341. And we will know either this week, well, we should know next week as to which committee that it's going to be referred to. We have an idea, but until that happens, we'll just hold off. That particular bill, there are roughly 11 people associated with that program, or at least that's what the TCEQ is saying. We have talked to the Railroad Commission about their desires, what they see happening with the program. They would probably have double the number at a minimum over what the TCEQ has. Many of those people, many of the new people would be associated with contested case hearings, because contested case hearings are handled internally with Railroad Commission attorneys versus the TCEQ uses the a state office where they use administrative law judges. So that would be one area where there would be an increase. And the second would be an increase in the inspectors. And the third area would be an increase in what we'll call air quality scientists within the Railroad Commission versus what the TCEQ has today. The way that the bill is framed, it actually says, as I pointed out, the entire program. So US EPA, the US Environmental Protection Agency, would delegate certain portions of the air and water statutes. So it's almost like a redelegation process that would require a letter from the governor to go to US EPA to begin the process. The process, we think, will take between 12 and 15 months just for the delegation piece. And so we have put into this bill a 2-year time frame. So from September of this year, 2 years out, at that particular time, the Railroad Commission would pick up the program. Not, it could happen earlier, and if that's the case, but the delegation has to happen, and also the what I call merger of both agencies, that needs to take place. So we've allowed them 2 years for that to happen. Last area that I'll highlight that is in the bill is how is this program paid for? Let me just say that there is a registration fee for which they're now roughly 1,100. That's an approximate number. These are the APOs that actually excavate soil. There are some that don't, like concrete batch plants. They're not part of this. So this principally pertains to sand and gravel operations and rock quarries. And there is a formula that is used. And so we have increased the maximum or up to a certain amount of money that the larger rock quarries and some of the sand and gravel operations would be paying the state. So in this case, when the Railroad Commission takes over, they would have adequate funding so they wouldn't have to go to the state to ask for any money to administer the program. So that's the aggregate production operation bill. The two other bills, we have our House Bill 3883 and House Bill 3884. We prepared these bills based upon sit down with the Kendall County Commissioners, other people within Kendall County, and also people from Hayes and some other counties as well. Let me first talk about the more abbreviated bill, which is what we call House Bill 3384, which has to do specifically with Kendall County. It is bracketed specifically for Kendall County at this time, and it has to do with lot frontages. In both these bills, let me point out that the people need to vote on what this bill is doing. And that means giving the county commissioners authority to determine lot frontages. So it's a lot frontage management initiative whereby the people in the county would vote first, and giving their approval, it would allow the county commissioners then to work with developers to determine lot frontages. So again, it is the voters have to vote and approve. Secondly, it is bracketed only for Kendall County, and it involves the county commissioners determining lot frontages regarding developments in unincorporated areas. Let me emphasize unincorporated areas. These bills do not have anything to do with city boundaries or extraterritorial jurisdictions, ETJs. The second bill is much more comprehensive, House Bill 3883. It has to do with what has already been designated by the state of Texas. The state of Texas has, in 1990, I believe, time period, designated what is called the Hill Country Priority Groundwater Management Area. Again, Hill Country Priority Groundwater Management Area, which is sometimes called a PGMA. That's the acronym. So it's a Hill Country PGMA. It encompasses 9 counties, some of which are entire counties, some of which are portions of those counties. As a result, it also includes what we call the element of water science. Water science is the backbone of this particular bill. The water science that is being done, performed, we think, in highly effective ways by groundwater conservation districts. And so the bill calls for, again, people to vote. Approval for them would say that in unincorporated areas, county commissioners would be able to use the existing desired future condition baseline established by the groundwater conservation districts in determining how land in those areas would be developed for housing purposes. Again, unincorporated areas. In particular today, this is tied in the counties, the desired future conditions are tied directly to what we'll say is the Trinity Aquifer, the Trinity Groundwater Aquifer. So that if a developer was coming into a county, there are certain restrictions in place that say that if you use water in that county from the Trinity Aquifer, here are some, not guidelines, but here are requirements that you must meet. These are what developers would call very stringent. It would not allow them to construct 3 to 5 homes per acre or up. And as such, what has happened is, and another reason why we have put this other additional condition in the bill is water purveyors are saying outside various counties, and they have wells into the Trinity that they are able to provide water for the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We believe that the drought of 2010, 11 through 2014, 15 showed people that the water within the Trinity, again, certain parts of certain areas, was not dependable from an availability standpoint, and also to some extent a quality standpoint. It also showed us that the surface waters were not, such as rivers and lakes, were not dependable from a sustainability standpoint. So as such, we have put a condition in this bill that says right now that if if a developer comes forward and says that they want to provide water from the Trinity Aquifer outside of a particular county, we are saying in all probability no, because the Trinity in this bill is being treated as one geological unit. So what we're saying in essence is, if you want to get water from the Trinity in Comal County and attempt to bring it in to Kendall County, because again, that is somewhat allowed by current requirements, or it is allowed by this bill that would not be allowed, because we're saying that the Trinity is being treated as one geological unit, so you're going to have to find some other water source. So what does this mean? This means that until additional water sources are found, such as water from the Carrizo Aquifer, water from some aquifer storage and retrieval project, that in fact the unincorporated areas of the Hill Country Pygmies will remain pretty much the same as they are today. And this will allow what we believe the county commissioners to work with municipalities, to work with the public, to work with groundwater conservation districts, to truly have some time to put together a meaningful and sustainable plan for development within their counties. The last item that I'd like to talk about very quickly, in Kendall County has gone forward, the county commissioners, to perform a survey. So they've already gone out within the community, within their county, to perform a survey. That will become very useful for us when we present this bill, when it's referred to its particular committee. We are in the process now of contacting all groundwater conservation districts within the Hill Country Pygmy. We are in the process of contacting all county judges and certain county commissioners and other organizations that are interested in having them line up such that when these bills are referred to the committee, that they become active in the form of telephone calls, emails, texts, letters, etc., so that when these bills are in fact heard in a committee hearing, that the Hill Country can be very well represented to state their opinions. The last item is, just so that everybody knows, the Texas Department of Transportation has a new district engineer in San Antonio. This was a big issue to some people regarding TxDOT projects having unintended consequences of flooding. And so there will be meetings set up with this new TxDOT senior engineer to show her exactly what has happened in the past and to recommend certain proposals to correct what some of the people consider to be our deficiencies due to the flooding that is caused by the TxDOT projects. That's all I've got. There's a lot there. So I will now open it up, I guess, to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. I did have a couple of just housekeeping matters. Is it 3883? What stage is it in? Is it in committee or where's it at?
It will 3883 and 3884 should be referred to their committee next week. We don't know what that committee is. We have a good idea, but again, we will send back out to everybody when it's referred to the committee so that everybody knows who it is, who's the chairman, who are on the committees, and contact points for them.
Yeah, please do circulate that information so we can make it available.
Yes, sir.
Question, Larry. I noticed that Harris introduced 666 and 668 to natural resources, regulating groundwater conservation districts. Do you know anything on that?
No, we have a meeting set up this week, Friday, to find out exactly what that means.
Okay, thank you.
Larry, this is Tommy. On the two bills, 3883 and 3884, are those considered local bills?
The local bill is the 3884 because it's bracketed specifically for Kendall County. The other bill is the Pigma wide, so that is not considered to be at least bracketed in the sense of only one or two counties. So we are going in, or our strategy is to, because we've gotten a lot of sign up by both Democrats and Republicans. So they are not talking about this necessarily being a local bill. They are speaking about it in terms of it being related specifically to the Hill Country Pigma. The language they are using, Tommy, is they are telling whoever is on the committees and others right now, as these dialogues are going on, that this is the Hill Country. So they are using those terms rather than saying local or anything else.
Okay. Very good. There was one in here and I had marked it and I, live for me, can't lay my finger on it, but it allowed people in to recover attorney's fees. Anybody see that one?
Yeah, it's House Bill, it's House Bill 966 under the natural resources.
Natural resources.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one I'd offer to you to keep an eye on as well, so we can all help us understand what that is.
Yes, we had a conversation on that the other day, trying to find out what it meant, and I'm afraid that the meeting ended very quickly when people couldn't answer questions. So
It's, yeah, because on the surface, it seems like someone with a thick wallet can challenge a groundwater district because they probably got more money than the groundwater district.
It'd be interesting to
And take,
see.
use the courthouse to break the entity to win, whether it's right, wrong, or not. So, Mark, you know anything about that?
Yeah, I can provide some insight onto what's going on with that. That same language is in 666 and 668, I guess. Historically, under Chapter 36 of the Water Code, groundwater districts had a provision in there, and that's what's proposed to be changed, that if they are challenged in a lawsuit and they win, that the judge shall award attorney fees. And the reason for that historically was because when the groundwater districts were created by the state, they were not provided representation from the attorney general like other state agencies are.
Right.
And so they would have to basically carry all the load in a potential lawsuit. So those three bills, those has historically been brought up at the legislature, probably the last three sessions in varying forms. Last session, the Texas Alliance of Groundwater Districts and others tried to reach some level of agreement with Senator Perry and with various House representatives. And that's where the May language came from. Essentially, winner gets their attorney's fees. From what I understand, these bills are going to move. The 900 bill, the Burns bill, is a little bit different in that it expands the attorney fees provision from just your normal lawsuit, which you would typically see from a permitting perspective. It also changes the attorney's fees provision for enforcement actions by groundwater districts when they enforce their rules. So that they no longer get the shall, it now becomes a may get attorney's fees for those groundwater districts. It's my understanding that particular language may change at committee. It may be substituted out and look more like 666. I think from what I understand, 666, because it is identical in a companion bill to Senator Perry's bill, is more likely to move. But I don't know that for a fact. The rest of those bills, 666 and Senator Perry's bills, deals with some permitting provisions for groundwater districts. The regulation of groundwater districts essentially lays out some additional information on what's required to go about permitting at a groundwater district. And it also provides some language for petition for rulemaking by individuals and how that process should be handled by a groundwater district. But that's essentially the background I have on those bills.
Thank you, Mark. It's useful.
Another question on the House bills, and I noticed that 1905 relieves regional water planning groups of certain duties. And 2103 relates to the authority of certain water planning entities to hold certain meetings. Any ideas whether those bills apply to this body?
I can't answer that. I will have to go back and talk to the people and then get a write-up on each bill, and then I'll send that back to you, but I honestly don't know.
Okay, thanks, Larry.
Anything else, Tom?
I think that's it.
Anybody else have any other questions for Larry?
I'd just like to thank you for the work you're doing on these, Larry. I think there are a lot of people that I've been talking to that are very excited about some of these bills, and we're hopeful that that they can make it through successfully. We know it's a real hard thing to navigate the legislature. It's easy to kill a bill, so in a way our fingers are crossed, but we'll also be pulling for it.
Well, thank you. We are very fortunate that I think this time we've seen really both, I don't like to use the term bipartisan. I don't know what that really means, but I would just say that we are very appreciative of the support from both the Senate and the House side on these water develop on these what we'll call land development bills. So, yeah, you bet. So when the time comes, we're going to be counting on everybody to do just that, and that's to emphasize their sense of importance that these bills not only get into committee, get out of committee, but that they get passed.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it.
Yep.
We'll be looking forward to getting the follow-up on those as well. Thank you, sir. Is there anyone out there, Barrett, that has their hand up or that looks like they want to visit with us or speak about Larry's presentation? No. Thank you. All right, moving on. Tommy, I'm thinking maybe we ought to mix this up a little bit, move your update up front and let Mr. Mann bat clean up.
I like that. I like that. Mike gets to be the caboose. I mean, the cleanup.
So if you don't mind, we'll
Sure.
move your update up front, let Mr. Thompson speak to
And,
the water issue, and then Mr. Mann can make his presentation.
all right, very good.
All right, thanks, sir.
You're welcome. Relative to groundwater updates, I'll look to our two GCD board members, Kurt and Ben, if there's anything new that's involved with the Cow Creek relative to the MAG or the DFC.
We haven't had anything up. We just had a meeting last week. We did talk about it. GMA 9 is working with the state right now on the MAG. We haven't heard anything of results on that yet. We come to our meetings, we've been talking lately about just how we're tracking DFC. And so we think we're doing a good job, but we have, compared to some of the other districts, but we're constantly looking at how we're monitoring that DFC level and how that is affecting Kendall County. Because we do our monitoring wells, and in particular, if you ever come to our meetings, we've got some water monitoring well maps, and we see some of the wells. We're trying to determine whether or not they're viable, because we've had one particular well that's right in the center of the county that's being pumped hard, and we're thinking about removing it from the DFC consideration because it was originally a monitoring well. It's no longer a true monitoring well.
It's production well with drawdown.
Right, it's now a production well with drawdown. So trying to truth our data on that to watch it, but I think we're averaging right about 15 feet right now from our historical target level, and 30 foot's the maximum.
Well, with the bills that Larry discussed at length with us, the DFC number, it's going to take on a whole new gravity,
Right.
so to speak. It's going to be a very important metric. So, and the science behind it. So I'll offer that to y'all. As you're doing that critical analysis and working with the city, you'll be thinking not just on that issue, but focusing ahead, a little forecasting on that a little bit. So
I will say on a more immediate standpoint, we're still in stage 2 drought, but honestly, we're starting off the year pretty low. And so it's just more a public service announcement, but we may find ourselves in stage 3 going, at the end of next meeting. We'll see. People are starting to irrigate starting about right now. And that's the big drawdown in our region.
We have a great opportunity since we had Snowmageddon and everybody's landscape got devastated to go back with some nice drought tolerant plants. Think about that. Yeah.
Just as a matter of course, maybe there's something we can do, put down some alternatives out there. I don't know, Ben, if you've got some resources.
I got tons of
Others.
resources.
Yeah.
Let's put that out on the website. That's getting that in people's hands. They're getting ready to lay down significant money on landscaping. It's at least get native plants out and that sort of thing. So we can, things that are drought tolerant, things that'll not suck up the water. quite so badly.
Xeriscaping, rock landscapes,
Absolutely.
If you're gonna go turf, go with something.
Yep.
Low water use.
So whatever we can do to help educate on that, I think would be
Sounds good.
smart thing to do.
Flipping from groundwater to surface water, Daryl agreed to kind of give us an update just on what contracts GBRA has in the area.
Thanks, Tommy. GBRA does provide wholesale surface water to many entities in Kendall County, out of Canyon Lake. It's where our surface water supplies come from. The greater Boerne area, it's pretty much the city of Boerne. We provide about 3,600 acre feet per year. In addition, we also have contracts with Kendall West and Marilomas, who are just outside of Boerne. We provide also in Kendall County surface water to Fair Oaks and Cordillera. And in addition, we also provide water to Saws. And as part of that, Saws is providing water to Kendall County WCID number 3, which is just south of Boerne. Part of that water, of our commitments to surface water supplies, we have about 4,000 acre feet that's committed to Saws out of our Western Canyon facilities. That water is committed to Saws until the end of December of 2037. At that time, Saws could exercise an option to continue that commitment. It's not anticipated that they will do so based on the terms of the agreement. So that 4,000 would come back to GBRA to allocate to existing new customers, however that may be. Of that 4,000, 1,500 acre feet of that is committed potentially to the Kendall County WCID number 3, should Saws be unable to use any of their other sources of water up into Kendall County. Really our water supply right now to most of our contracts in Kendall County is for base flow. So that is not a sustainable that's not for peak flow. So they must have other water supplies or significantly other storage to be able to handle their peak flow during their higher usage times during the year. So, something we're going to have to look at is as that 4,000 acre feet comes back to GBRA to be able to reallocate, the plant and some of our transmission system will most likely need to be upgraded to be able to depending on where that water is allocated to. At that time, we may also talk with some of our customers to see, is there any desire to increase any of the capacities for the transmission system and treatment system to include any type of peaking factor and what that cost might look at. So those are things that the city and the surrounding communities are going to have to consider. But as of right now, our flow is mainly geared for base flow, which means almost every other entity needs to have some type of alternative water supply to meet those peak flows.
And is there a queue, or is it going to be a highest bidder kind of deal, or how does that,
Well, first we're going to see what ability our existing system can handle for where that allocation might be available and what type of improvements might be needed. And we're undergoing those studies right now to evaluate that. So I think we have a goal of probably by the end of 2023 to have an idea of what improvements might be needed and where that allocation could be available and what that cost might be. Since it'll take a decade to develop alternative water supply source. So these communities need to know whether or not they're going to have any of this water available to them and whether they should budget it for that come the 2030s, middle 2030s.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
And Kurt and Ben, what is the MAG number?
On you, man.
Off the top of my head. Probably should have it memorized. I don't. I'd have to look it up. I can probably get it here in a minute and circle back.
I can tell you that it's not It's not a very big number.
I saw it recently. I know where
Yeah,
it is. but,
it's not a very
It's
big
in our
number. It's just a
report, yeah.
5-digit number and it's a small one, so. All right, Kurt, I know you sit on Region L on the planning group, and you were gonna give us a brief update.
Yes, sir.
on
So,
any activities there.
yes, sir. So, Region L, we recently we effectively completed what would be the 5th planning cycle, the 2021 region plans. Those are live. Those are up on the Texas Water Development Board website if you're interested. So now the state is now taking all that data from the regions and compiling the state water plan. So for effectively us at the region level, we are now right at the very beginning of the 2026 regional water plan cycle. So our work is kind of slow right now. It's a bunch of administrative getting ready for the next planning cycle. So one of the big changes for us administratively is that we're now, as a planning cycle, required to have representatives on all of the regions groups that border us. So every planning cycle now has representatives that cross over into the adjacent planning groups. So we've delegated people to be those representatives for us in all of the different areas. The 2021, I have the schedule up for the region planning cycle. There's a Texas Water Development Board mining water use study that's currently going on. That's going to go from now into 2022, which is going to be a part of the 2026 plans. And then they're doing rules updates for the regions in 2021. So that's what the main 2 actions you'll see in 2021. And then we'll be looking at the applications for projects, and those things are open for the 2026 regional water plan cycle now.
And keeping in mind that the term mining water use doesn't include just like the APOs that Larry talked about earlier, or coal. It also includes all the oil and gas production.
Correct.
That's considered mining by the Water Development Board when they quantify use.
So when do you anticipate the planning group taking a look at growth projections for the upcoming planning cycle?
I bet we'll start to see some of the preliminary data probably in 2022. I don't know if we'll see much this year as far as growth projections. Maybe late, our 3rd or 4th quarter meeting. So maybe look in November, but I bet it'll be 2022 to really see some of that data.
They run that through the state demographer or
Because
their own consulting firm.
we don't have to, I think we don't have to approve the projections until September of 2023. So that's the schedule for approving projections. So that's why I don't think we'll see much till 2022.
Yeah, I think the Water Development Board will provide some of that data, and then there'll be an opportunity for the communities inside there to see if there needs to be some allocation between the communities or if there's a change. I know there's been quite a few changes over the last planning cycle or 2, just because of how much growth, some of the growth that was projected, probably 2 planning cycles ago to be happening by 2040 has already occurred. So they've had to update this area for projections quite a bit in the last 2 planning cycles.
Yeah, according to our schedule, review of the draft projections starts in January of 2022. So we may see some of that at the end of 2021, but the functionality where we'll review it and take petitions from the user groups on changes in any of those projections will be there in 2022.
It'll be interesting. I don't know if that'll show any or indicate the changes that have occurred due to COVID and people now telecommuting more, less commuting into the urban areas, urban centers, and choosing where they live. That's part of what's driving the growth pressures that you see in outlying communities. So it'll be interesting to look at that.
It's kind of a double whammy between the influx of new residents and existing residents increasing their use.
So, thank you. Relative to the Trinity, Glen Rose, Headwaters, and Hill Country, I spoke with the general managers at each one of those groundwater districts about coming in somewhere in the next 4 to 6 weeks and sitting down or being available to us via Zoom to have a meeting to talk about what's happening surrounding us in the surrounding areas, what the groundwater district's doing. And I've also reached out to the gentleman at City of Kerrville who's in charge of their ASR program. I know that's one of the things that was listed in the last water plan, and we need to find out what their successes have been, and what challenges that they've had across the board. So what I told each one of those individuals with the general managers was, I'd like you to talk 4 or 5 minutes about what you're doing. And we'll kind of do it in a panel format, roll along down there, and then we'll throw it open for Q&A. We want to know what are the best management practices you've had, what's been successful, where do you see planning going? And it would be really interesting because that gives us multiple viewpoints from multiple different planning groups and 3 different GMAs and 3 different, 3 different regional water planning groups. Or it's Gillespie and K also, maybe, or J, I mean, you know, they are with Kirk anyway, so it gives us a broad spectrum, I guess. Is the point I'm trying to make, so.
Okay.
And some folks to look at, and they express an interest in doing it and staying abreast of what we're doing here, so. And I also ask them, now, we want your candid feedback, y'all are the experts in this, each one of these guys has been doing this for a long time. And we don't want some blunt force trauma, but we just want the unsanitized truth here, what do you see?
I think it's important to pay attention to what's going on outside of Boerne, because a lot of the things that are going on will impact Boerne, either your existing supplies or access to potential supplies that you may want to tap into. So you need to be aware and understand either, you know, what's going on and also what risks are associated with the use of those supplies.
Yeah, it's a dialogue that needs to be opened up, and this is a good way to start that. I think so. Thank you, Tommy. Appreciate that. Are you coordinating dates at this point?
I told them I'd brief the group today, and then I'd visit with you about when we thought we might want to do it, and I'd get back to them with some options.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. We'll work on.
I know we've got that as an
Thanks,
action
man.
item down here.
Yep. All right, anything else for the good order, Mr. Matthews?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I got a text from Milan Mikulek. He said MAG is about 10,000 acre feet. And it's available groundwater, obviously.
Thank you, Ben.
I'm not going to ask the next question. How much of that's already allocated? Oops.
It's over 4,000.
Yeah,
Yep.
like 4 or 5.
Yeah. I did find that information quickly. It's allocated, what was that? 4,981.54.
Including exempt uses, or I don't think so.
No, that doesn't include exempt. Yeah.
Yeah, we got to protect those. So.
So is that current uses or is that allocated?
That's permitted.
That's permitted, so it's allocated in a sense. Yeah. I mean, we have caveats on that too. There are new scenarios where we can curtail pumping if they hit a certain threshold, but those are limited. Those are, you guys know, it's a particular industry at this point, but it's starting to expand to really all, heavy users.
Because as GBRA's service water that we provide to this area is base flow, most of our customers are about half of their commitment amount at this point. As they grow, so that as they grow into the surface water component, their groundwater component or other source component is going to also continue to grow. So I don't know how their permits match up to, but being able to fully utilize the surface water as well.
Well, speaking of that,
I was gonna say, there's gonna be a segue coming up.
batting cleanup, and I know he's a baseball guy, is Mr. Mike Mann, and the city has looked at that inside and out. So.
Yeah, we have, and it started way before I worked at the city. Barrett, can you get my PowerPoint up? So what I'm going to present to you guys, I was asked to briefly present how the city of Boerne's water utility works, and there are all kinds of perspectives, of course. I intend to present this from the perspective of an operator, not necessarily a groundwater manager. We have Cow Creek representatives, we have GBRA representatives, we have other utilities that are probably in attendance, but I'm going to speak from the perspective of the operator when it comes to what we have to do to keep the system pressurized. And we can go into those other factors if you want. I could go on for hours, but I'm just going to try to do this in 10 minutes and try to go quickly. But the bottom line is that the city of Boerne has, for drinking water, really 3 sources of potable water. And this map kind of shows them at a scale you probably can't read very well, but we have out at Boerne City Lake, we have a water treatment plant that was built in the late 60s, early 70s, along with the with the lake. The lake was installed primarily for flood control, but the city at the time had the foresight to get some water production rights out of it. We do have a permit. I'll get into that in a little bit. Well, I'll get into that on the next slide. We have 9 operational groundwater wells, 2 of which are designated emergency use only. They're just not very productive. But we can use them in an emergency. There are some other purple dots on the map that you see there. Those are older wells that we don't use anymore or haven't started to use yet. But we still have a permit from Cal Creek that I'll go into in a second on available groundwater. The third source we have, Daryl spoke about it earlier, is our water from Canyon Lake from GBRA. And that we take delivery down at our Buckskin tank site on Buckskin Drive off of Cascade Caverns Road on the south end of town. So those 3 combined sources get mixed in the system and go out to our customers. So of those sources, the wells, I don't know the history very, very well, but I think in the 30s or 40s, the city drilled its first wells or developed its first wells and started pumping into a distribution system in downtown. When Cal Creek Groundwater Conservation District came into existence a couple of decades ago now, Tommy was the president at the time. We applied for and received our permit from Cal Creek for a maximum allocation of 1,850 acre feet a year. Now, I'm going to talk about this stuff in terms of annual numbers and average numbers, but really what it comes down to from an operational standpoint is how much water you can produce over a series of consecutive days, especially in the summer. So if you look at our Cal Creek permit, the average is 1.65 million gallons per day average. Realistically, the peak is going to be, it's very volatile. We just don't know. We talked about how we are going into this summer season with low groundwater levels right now. And so how much will be available this summer, we don't know yet. But we do feel like from a planning standpoint, it's going to be lower than average. So from a planning standpoint, when I talk about 1.8 million gallons a day available, that's in a robust year. That's not going to be this year. We're not going to have 1.8 million gallons a day available. Bernie City Lake, the water in Bernie City Lake is not owned by the city, it's owned by the state. And we have a permit from TCEQ for withdrawal, and our maximum withdrawal for municipal and domestic use is 833 acre feet. That's only 750,000 gallons per day average. Our plant can peak up to 1.5 million gallons per day. But again, if we can't take 1.5 million gallons per day, we would be over our annual allocation. Western Canyon, we have a contract, long-term contract with GBRA for 3,611 acre feet. That's about 3.2 million gallons. It comes at constant flow. Our deal with, Daryl spoke to this, our deal with GBRA, and he calls it base flow. It is a constant flow 24/7, 365 days a year. So when we buy water, we buy it on an annual basis, and it's just broken out the same amount every day, and it comes on a constant flow. So the next graph will make that more clear and more understandable. But right now, we're taking about 1,600, maybe 1,650 acre feet per year. I might have a typo in there. So our peaking capability is around 1.4, 1.5 million gallons per day. I think it's around 3.2 at full allocation, but right now it's about between 1.4 and 1.5. Now, the fourth source that I have on here is reclaimed water, and that's not a potable water source, but it's a major conservation source available for conservation. And as far as I know, we're one of, if not the first utilities in the state that has dual water systems going in neighborhoods. So there's 2 large neighborhoods under construction, Esperanza and Ranches at Creekside, where they're putting in potable water pipe, we call it blue pipe, and they're putting in reclaimed distribution systems, and that's only for lawn irrigation. So their automated lawn sprinkler systems are all fed off reclaimed water. And so what is the effect of that over time is those houses will only use their base flow from a potable water source, and all of their lawn irrigation that goes through an automatic sprinkler system will be coming from reclaimed water. So in the end, that's probably 3,200 houses. If just those 2 neighborhoods develop on that, it's funded by the development, not the city. And That was the deal we made with those developers in order to serve them. So it's a major conservation effort when it comes to the savings of potable water, and it will dramatically reduce our average per capita usage of potable water. So let's talk about this. So I chose 2006. This is kind of a typical graph of what you would see from a consumption standpoint on an annual basis. So if you want to call this like the shape of a head, the peak in the middle of the summer is the head, and the lower wintertime usage could be considered the shoulder. We call it the shoulder months. And so if you look at this is 2006. I chose this year because this is the year that our GBRA contract started. So before we had water from GBRA, we were basically producing 50% of our water from groundwater and 50% of our water from the lake. And that was the demand. We were able to just go 50-50 every day and manage it that way. GBRA came online in April of 06, and you can see that dark blue band at the bottom is the water that we get from them, steady flow every day. And so it's our base flow. That's what Darryl was talking about as being our base flow. And what that did was it allowed us to reduce that reliance for peaking and daily use for those other two resources. So when we got three, our base flow, or the lower level, the bottom end of what we purchased that year came from GBRA, and we continued to make up the difference from our other two sources. So that's why I chose that year. There's nothing special about it other than that was the year we started taking GBRA, and it was easy to show their effect on our reduction of water from other sources. So you take those years, those heads and shoulders over from 2000, from the year 2000 to the year 2020, and that's what it looks like. That's our water production total. And so every one of those peaks is the summertime peak. You can see some years like 2007, the peak was a lot lower. That was an unusually wet year. We had a lot of rain. Therefore, we had a lot less lawn irrigation, and we didn't have much of a peak. Conversely, look at 2019, 2020, 2019 especially, we had a lot of water use. But it has grown over the years as population increased. And this is total water usage. This also includes reclaimed. So it's not all potable water, but it's a representation of how our peak has increased every year. So here's 2020. This is the actual production graph from 2020. And you can see again at the bottom, that dark blue band is our GBRA base flow. The light blue is water that we get from wells. The green is water we get from the treatment plant at Boerne City Lake. And the purple is reclaimed. And so as houses get added in those two neighborhoods, that purple band will get bigger and bigger. So the total consumption will go up because we'll have more customers, but the percentage of purple will get bigger. And therefore, the average per capita use from our customers will go down. So that's a major conservation source. Let's see. And then when we talk about in terms of ultimate population, we've always thrown out a number of our water availability being around 35,000. Right now, we're a little over 20. So where does that come from? Well, if we were using our full allocation of 3,611 acre feet from GBRA, the bottom band, a realistic number for well water production, especially limited in the summer, not the banner year, but maybe an average year. The amount of water we get from Boerne City Lake, when we are at maximum production and we're using the peaking sources that Darren was speaking of, we cannot go over our maximum allocation from TCEQ of 833 acre feet. The big deal though is that we will need to use all of that in the summer. That will be our peaking source. However, our current plant can't handle it. So we will need to either dramatically upgrade our existing plant from a maximum of 1.5 to over 4 million gallons per day, up to maybe even replace it with something that can peak between 4 and 5 million gallons a day. Again, not to increase the total amount of water we can take, but just to be able to serve more in a single day. And you see the purple on top, it grows. So, and that if you look at displacing or replacing that purple with green and blue, that you can tell is the amount of conservation that we'll have from, savings on drinking water that we'll have with reclaimed water. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Like I said, I can go on for hours if you want. This is a chart that, and I'm not even sure I got this one. I may have some typos in this one. I put it together quickly, but updated for 2021. That's kind of the lot count, the way we assume that they're going to be built. It's probably a little aggressive, but we want to make sure that we plan for faster growth than we experience, just to make sure we have the supplies in place. You can see that this only goes up to, with the developments that are on the ground, we're only anticipating a population of 27,000 right now that we would be serving water for. So that's not our total available water, but it's a significant part of it. So future water resource possibilities, we did what we called a plan a few years ago. Might be a bit of a misnomer. It was really supposed to be a study of, if we were going to control our future ourselves, these are our potential resources. Whether it's aquifer storage and recovery, ASR, direct or indirect reuse, conservation. We talked about reclaimed water being part of that effort. Those are our supplies that are the things that we can control ourselves. Now, there's pros and cons to every one of them. What that study did not include is other regional resources and that might be available, whether it's more water from GBRA, maybe it's a project with SAW, something regional that the community is a part of, not just the city of Boerne. That's probably going to be our next resource. Now, the reason I say probably is because we just don't know. You can look back at the graphs and the information I presented, and you can see that water from GBRA is our base flow. It's our future. It's what we have available. We don't purchase more of it right now because it's expensive. And I'll talk about that briefly in just a second. One of the misunderstandings that the community has. But what I wanted to say is that, in the mid 90s, we didn't know that resource was out there. And by the early 2000s, it was our future. So some regional project would likely come along. I think all the players that need to be involved, be it Cal Creek, GBRA, SAWS, the WCIDs and other interested parties and I'm leaving some out, Fair Oaks, Kendall West, all those folks are represented in this group. And that's why it's so great to have this group together, because we're getting to know each other and each other's needs. And I think that's what's important for the future. Now, if your charge is to identify that resource, you might have to have a crystal ball, the one that didn't exist in the early 90s. But there is a list, and there's certainly things to talk about and think about. What I did want to talk about a little bit is I have seen some comments on social media, especially if we talk about available water from the city for a population of 35,000. I see some comments as if we have that much water, why do we have to go on restrictions every year? Well, it gets back to that daily production capability, and so providing more peaking capability costs money, and it's money that our ratepayers pay. As a municipal utility, we don't make money. We spend everything we make, and we make everything we spend. And so if we do something expensive to purchase more water so that people don't have to go on restrictions every summer, that means that the customers pay for it all year long. And so we try to balance peaking capability with cost, which has an effect on rates, and try to just balance that. And the policymakers of the city council, they depend on staff to make recommendations. But that's why we have restrictions. It's basically to keep consumption under control, to keep the peaks under control, to make sure that conservation stays top of mind with people. And it's really to control the rates. We don't typically have a lot of people calling us saying, raise my rates so that I can have more water in the summer. We don't get that call. So that's a balance that we have to manage ourselves. So any questions or comments you have, I'd be happy to entertain. Did I make that quick enough for you, Mr. Cahoon?
Well done. Concise. Thank you, Mike.
Hey, you bet.
Hey, Mike, real quick, is just on the subject of rates, and maybe it's a Jeff, one of y'all tag on this. I assume you have to look at those periodically. There's some frequency that you look at rate structure when you look at the makeup of your total water stream, no pun intended.
From a very high level, if we start to lose money, then we look at rates. But Jeff can probably speak to that with a lot more detail than I can.
Hello. Yes, we do that frequently. We're going to be doing it on reclaimed water before the next watering season comes up. That's on my agenda to complete in the next 6 to 8 weeks. What Mike has shown is that, yes, we are eliminating our peaks using the reclaimed water, but it's also, in my opinion, too affordable. And we need to make it a little more, a little higher price so that you do have some control. Some of what I've observed so far is that there doesn't seem to be the same urgency to conserve the reclaimed water as there is for potable. And I think pricing is the biggest reason for that. We do have the ability in our ordinances to do the same thing with reclaimed as we do with potable water. If we see waste water running down the street, that's not allowed. There are certain things that are repeated in both ordinances, but definitely see the need to increase the control on the reclaimed water sooner than later. As far as the regular water, we didn't plan to do that this year. We talked about it some early on. Of course, then when COVID happened and there were other financial constraints on people, raising their rates didn't feel like a real good thing to do. So we put that on hold, but the reclaimed water is a different situation and it's very affordable right now. So.
Well, Jeff, you were right to the heart of my concern is I don't know that people always value how precious the resource is.
Right.
So, and that's a societal change, and that's the conservation and education that we can change that. And I think, and you look back since, the Cow Creek was started in particular, and prior to that being declared a priority groundwater management area, in that generation of time, you've seen significant change. It's a 25-year period. We've seen a whole bunch of change, people's attitudes and perception and that, and I think we got to keep that going. So.
The conservation and education is what I hope is a message that comes out of this committee. City utilities are one of those businesses that asks our customers to use less. We don't try to grow usage. We try to control usage, and control is the wrong word, but manage usage. Even the reclaimed water is a finite resource. Right now, we don't have a stream flow return. We do have some contracts and commitments to keep a certain amount of flow in the creek. It's good for the environment, good for the community, but long-term, we might have a regulatory requirement to return water to the creek. So it's a finite resource too, and so conservation is important.
Very important. The next big cost for our water ratepayers is the expansion of the water plant that Mike spoke about. When we have to compress that usage that we do all year now into 3 summer months, that's a lot of money to do that, to go from 1.5 million gallons a day to 4 million. So very much would rather spend some money now on conservation, rewarding conservation and improving it, and keep pushing that big cost out as far as we can.
Current estimate's about $20 million just to be able to peak from the plant. Again, not getting any more total water, just a higher peak.
Is it possible, we were just talking about putting out a list of drought adapted plants. Is it possible to send one out to your utility customers with the bill? Here's a great list of drought tolerant.
Absolutely.
We can't, a lot of our billing is online.
Electronic
now.
But still.
We don't do many stuffers, but we can still put it out in whatever information form we can put it out.
We also have a utility website now that we didn't have before. So we have ways of getting that message out. We have really good communication staff to help us do that, Ben, and yes.
Cool. And then on that note about waste of purple pipe water, I have driven by some of those developments in the middle of summer, in the middle of the day, and seen the sprinklers going. And I can put it together. Other people go, "What the heck is that?" And I'm like, "It's purple pipe water," but at the same time, it doesn't, optics wise, it doesn't play well, right? Because then it's saying, "Hey, everybody, let's just blow water."
When we first turned on that resource, it was a decision of the council not to impose conservation measures. They wanted to show that it was an available resource, but usage was a little out of control for reasons that you're stating. And so they have implemented some restrictions and conservation measures as part of an ordinance, and that will continue.
Current ordinances don't allow usage during the same hours of usage that as potable when we're on restrictions. So.
Cool. Still not supposed to water during the middle of the day, regardless of resource.
Right.
And let it run down the street.
And don't let it run down the street. Not every day. You don't need it every day.
Right.
1 inch a week will do you.
And why it happens, it's a mix of reasons. But in general, I think a lot of it happens because when new houses get built, the builders or landscapers try to grow that grass in, and a lot of homeowners just don't reset the timers.
Mhm.
And so if we can help to educate folks on the importance of doing that, hopefully the more will comply.
Mhm. Also, from a standpoint of building codes, I know it might be going into different areas here, but I do wonder if I know it runs into some possible legal challenges when it comes to the state of Texas limiting what the city can do. But I do wonder if there are ways that we can, have our building codes stress water conservation or, say rainwater harvest ready kind of types of solutions, which are sometimes just a little bit of a plumbing fixture, with
We do have
just to plug in.
some landscape restrictions, turf
Yeah.
grass limitations, things like that already in place. Now, my house was built in the 90s. I've trained my St. Augustine as well as I can train it. And it uses about the amount of water, I measure. It uses about the amount of water that most people would expect from you to use.
Yeah.
And therefore, it came through the cold weather very well. It's green. Its roots were deep. It didn't freeze like a lot of the grass did, and it's starting to grow already. Still haven't turned the sprinklers on yet.
Thank you, John. Any other questions for Mr. Mann?
Good presentation. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, guys.
Barrett, do we have anybody online that had questions for Mr. Mann?
Actually, while we're at it, so I attended a presentation from a company called Flume, and they have this automated monitoring system. And actually, SAWS is, I think, we don't have SAWS in the room, but very, they're starting to use it with a bunch of pilot programs. In fact, they were featured on this presentation. They sent me the presentation, so I'll share it with you guys. But it was really interesting. The water patterns that they were seeing. And of course, as evapotranspiration goes up, literally the water use tracked like perfectly right with it. It was pretty impressive to me. But the other thing too, is they were noticing that, so for example, SAWS of course has a lot of aggressive conservation efforts. They're trying to move people off of water softeners. And I don't know what their plan is to do that, because hard water is not fun.
Well, hard water is not fun, but I'll tell you the water softener issue is more of a wastewater treatment requirement, or there salt in the wastewater treatment, salt that goes through the treatment process that gets just discharged to the creek, that'll probably be controlled more from a regulatory standpoint. And every one of those salt-based water softeners that backwashes put salt into the waste stream.
Right.
And so, hard water is not fun, but there are other technologies out there that don't use salt. There's a council person, I will leave nameless at this point, that's doing a pilot program for us, installed a conditioner instead of a softener. And that person says it works very well for their needs. So hopefully we can, we'll put that out in our education materials too, but it's more of a wastewater concern than a water concern.
Right on.
Yeah, to the extent there's some crossover, Mr. Mann, that we can put on this website and help push that information. I'd love to be able to get it to Ben and let's push it out there. And there's something about this, we're not moving on to new business, but I'd like to come back to it and see if there are any other efforts we can make just in the short term with the landscaping issue that's coming up. That's going to be really a hot topic coming up, and I think we're going to be pretty dry this year. It may be an opportunity for us to try to stick our toe in the water on a conservation effort here, at least locally, and see what kind of good we can do.
Well, Cow Creek's still in restrictions, as Ben spoke to earlier, and maybe Kurt, still in restrictions. That does reduce the amount of water that we can pump under our permit, and we comply. That means, however, we have less water available to our customers, and that's why we go on restrictions. I'm sorry. Yeah, so I'll repeat very briefly. Cow Creek will have restrictions this year because it is dry. That reduces the amount of water we'll have available. Again, I'm talking like an operator right now. And that means that we will probably have to impose restrictions on our customers in turn. Again, not because we don't have a total amount available, but for this summer, we will have a peak limitation, and that's when we have to impose restrictions.
Right. So many pennies in the bank, and you got to figure out when you're going to spend them.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. I didn't see anybody else have any questions. So if not, I'm going to ask Mr. Thompson to speak about Snowmageddon.
Snowmageddon, sure. And Mike can answer questions about that as well. But for my part of Snowmageddon, you hear the talk about the police being the thin blue line. Well, our thin blue line really is the water department folks. There's not very many of them, with Mike at the lead. And they were thin and blue and also frozen. I mean, those guys were out basically for 96 straight hours, trying to keep the patient alive. I kept envisioning it where I was, which is basically warm and safe in my living room, just on the phone all night. But you had a patient that was trying to bleed out, like most water systems out there. You heard about having to have boiled water notices because of the lack of the pressure. Water pressure went down below the TCQ required levels. And so that's what we were fighting. Snowmageddon started as an electrical concern, like are we going to be out of power? And knock on wood, the electrical system held up extremely well. And then it quickly turned into a water problem. And the problem was we were using water at peak levels in the middle of the summer. And our ability to draw on all the water sources that Mike just presented to you were getting limited, whether it was because the water plant was being cycled out as part of the rolling brownouts at GBRA, or our own water plant was being challenged, or the wells were going completely off of line. So for 96 hours, it was triage, trying to keep as much production coming in as we were bleeding out with people dripping faucets. And when I say dripping, some of them had them like running wide out. And also over 100 plus leaks that were ultimately found in the system. A lot of them in sprinkler systems in buildings where the pipes had just completely burst. And so we had people going in the middle of the night, all night long, going inside those places, getting very wet and cutting off the water and basically moving on to the next issue. So very proud of the fact that in that 96 hours, we didn't lose the patient. We never did have to go to a boiled water alert, although it got very close from a pressure standpoint, and all that we were doing and the tank still dropping day after day, hour after hour it's absolutely the worst disaster that I've been through in 41 years. I've been through a couple floods and a tornado or two. And of course, the pandemic's one of these long burn problems, right? But this was so dramatic on so many utility fronts at the same time. And you kept wondering what the end was. There was no end. When we started to warm up, that just means more pipes are going to blow up. So, and we're still feeling it on the customer service side. They're now dealing with trying to address people who had water bills way bigger than they would have had under normal conditions. And so we're taking either the actual month of February for a few people who the water usage was normal, or we're going back to prior month to see which one is lower. So we're adjusting bills now to try to help people get through that. So we'll have lost a lot of water, but that's, and some dollars in the process too, but that's why we built up reserves, right? You built your house of bricks for many years to try to weather this kind of storm. So we did that very well, and thanks to Mike Sharp and all his crew that made that happen. I think we're probably still working on making some repairs today. I know the Parks Department still has some restrooms and things where pipes have blown out of the walls that we're still working on. But all in all, it was quite an adventure. It wasn't what I had in mind for the last parts of my career. I thought maybe all the disasters were over. And now COVID and Snowmageddon within a year. So pretty cool. But it was fun from the standpoint of looking back on it. It was fun to watch how much work got done in such a compressed amount of time. People sleeping wherever we could put them up in a hotel or otherwise, and just staying here locally so that they could continue to assist. It was remarkable.
Well, you guys did a great job under very, very difficult circumstances. So we applaud your efforts.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, I was just going to say, Patrick, I think while our charge here has so far been really considering the resource base to work with, I think we learned through this incident that the user is where we get the feedback, right? And that the integration of both the infrastructure for supply and the resource for supply, we can't ignore that. I mean, there was plenty of water out there. We just couldn't move it to where it needed to be.
It was constrained and then it was leaking.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I want to make sure that we're a little bit more holistic as we do this going forward. That just making sure that we can have a source of water doesn't mean that we'll be able to supply it to those households and users that we're using for the demand statistic.
Well, in truth, that kind of gets back to the building codes comment. What can we do to harden ourselves against, to future proof, so to speak?
Yeah.
Right.
yeah, resiliency built into them. And again, I don't know what our legal constraints are there, but it's something that I really think is important for us.
That's a very good point. A lot of those pipes that burst were in the sprinkler system areas for larger buildings.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, some way to prevent that from happening.
Well, there's that. And actually, I would even say, I mean, I'm going to go more bigger than even sort of the more immediate thing of this committee and just talk about wildfire risks and hardening against that too. I think I've sent you guys stuff about that in the past, because that's going to hit when there's a drought, when there's low water, you know. And so it's a holistic, to Tom's point, it's a holistic consideration about making sure we're hard, we're a resilient city. And whatever we can do to build, especially our perimeter that way would be good.
Joe, good job with your staff. You're one of the few entities in our basin that did not have to go on a boil water notice, being able to keep up with the leaking system from the breaks and leaks and any supply interruptions. I have a question though on y'all's aggressiveness to disconnect or to disconnect those that you found the leaks. Was that y'all using some type of smart meter system where y'all were able to check the continuous usage and get staff out there aggressively to address that?
I'd like to say that was the case. It was more like, get over here now. But it's out there live doing that. Go ahead.
We do have smart meters, but the way they work is basically to check and see if there's continued use over 24 hours. That normally works, but when people are dripping and running faucets, a lot of people's water use was continuous over 24 hours, especially for 2 or 3 days. So those leaks were masked and it was hard to use those meters. But what we really relied on was, asking the public, check for leaks. And we put out a lot of social media posts about conserving and check for leaks, and, and our customers helped us get through it.
So we do have AMI on all of our systems. So after the event, yes, we have also been able to identify some customers who may still have an issue based on a continuous flow.
And that's one thing we've seen across the basin was the aggressive use of staff to get out and try to address customer leaks to help identify those through AMI or whatever means, do notifications, social media, just trying to get them to get outside to look themselves or using those AMIs. And that was probably the factor that we saw in a lot of entities, either the few that didn't lose pressure or the ones that only lost pressure for a minimum time without losing the entire water system.
And so just very briefly, boil water notices happen when a utility's pressure drops under 35 PSI or 20 in emergency conditions. Then you have to issue a boil water warning. The concern is that water in the pipes could be contaminated. And so some of those utilities that issued those notices might have kept water in their systems, but their pressure got too low. We were able to use stored water to keep our pressure up even when consumption outpaced production. So we had some wells freeze, we had some pipe breaks, we had a lot of production, we had some lost production due to rolling outages. But we were able to make up that difference due to storage and what I'll call prepping. And so a lot of our backup power worked, a lot of our storage we used. When it got scary for us is when we had used a significant amount of our storage and we were afraid we were going to have a fire or another big main break and use the rest of it, and then we would have no backup. That's when we really started to appeal to the public.
Well, so along your lines about talking about monitoring, I know, I've attended presentations from the city of New Braunfels. Apparently they have a pretty active monitoring system where they can see, hey, they'll call up a customer and say, you must have a hose that's running endlessly, or we're seeing a significant amount of leakage on a regular period, and they can notify the landowner, hey, you got to watch for that. That's kind of, it can kind of feel intrusive. So I think that's a bit of a dance to figure out how do you implement that without offending people. But at the same time, it seems like a smart water strategy to make sure that people are being truly responsible on their ends.
We do have that capability in our AMI system.
Okay, wow.
So what it does is looks for continuous usage, because in a normal world, you shouldn't have water usage of 24 hours a day.
Right.
It should turn off at some point, depending on lifestyle.
Cool.
Thank you, gentlemen. Any other questions? Anybody online have a question?
Actually, I do have one more question, not about the freeze, but it seems like there's all this talk about infrastructure across the country failing and needing to. How's ours doing? Do we have a lot of loss just in the pipes, or?
Our unaccounted for water, which is presumably some leaks that we don't know about yet in older pipes. And also some, probably some slow meters, those kind of things. Our unaccounted for water is lower than the average. So ours is pretty good. Now, our oldest pipe is only from the 40s. And it's cast iron, but it was backfilled in rock. So a lot of our leaks happen in that older pipe. The newer pipe, we've implemented some newer construction standards, and that newer pipe is working a lot better. Plastic pipes and things like that. And technology will continue to improve. But to your point, our unaccounted for water number is lower than most other communities.
Guys, I know, I
Please.
know, I don't want to keep us longer. It seems to me that the city benefited tremendously by the fact that you can provide water from multiple sources in multiple directions. You don't have any real single umbilicals stuck out there where if something failed, that whole part of the system is isolated. And I know it's much more expensive to loop water through when you build something or you reach out and serve something. But as we grow and as we look at, and I'm not asking y'all to reply, I'm making commentary here. As we look at growing and moving out, that's something that we collectively need to be aware of, is that you've got to be able to get water there from two directions in an emergency. Or to your point, Tom, we'll have plenty of water and we'll have 500 people isolated because we've had a main failure. Or we've had a lift station failure or something else. So,
Well, I agree with you. Ask Jeff Thompson how many times he's heard the word peak and loop from me.
It is a lot.
it's your Groundhog Day comment, right?
Yeah.
On our Highway 46 water loop is one of the next biggest capital projects we have online right now. Where a lot of our growth is, Esperanza, Ranches of Creekside, now 46. So we do want to come back up from the south side, Cascade Caverns with a connection. Make that
Get that there.
loop.
Our water system is a grid system, not really an umbilical like you're talking about
Right.
for the most part. And as we continue to grow, the focus will be to continue that looping and backfeed possible potential on.
As you move out from the circle, that's a harder and harder and more
It really is,
expensive
yeah.
proposition.
Especially when you don't have the right of way to put pipelines in. So that becomes problematic.
We demanded of development too, in individual subdivisions. It's cost. Usually there's pushback, but
Right.
that is part of our regulation. You must do that.
Cool.
All right, thank you again, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Appreciate your ongoing vigilance. It moves us on to action items. One I saw was a timeline for getting these regional meetings set up. And I don't know if this is the best format for that. Maybe we should handle that by email and so that way everybody's got schedules handy and we can try to sort through that. So I'll circulate an email and see what everybody's availability is like after this. And we'll try to get something on the calendar and then give you some available dates to reach out to other folks so we can get the panel put together. During the meeting, I picked up on the landscaping issue. I wanted to open some discussion about that, see what we might be able to do. And thinking a little bit about a subcommittee to help take some of the ideas that we have working and put some flesh on them in a more near-term fashion. There's just a lot of moving parts. Some of this is more of a plotting, gathering data, putting that in the right hands of the right people, and getting results back, process. Other portions of it, we could move a little faster and I'd like to open a discussion about how we might do that. So those are the things I had. I don't know if anybody else has other business they'd like to talk about during this portion of the meeting. but,
Well, I think that goes to what I talked with you, Patrick, about, there's a concern about overuse. Like everybody here has got a lot on their schedules and some people are coming, for example, we've got Larry Bailey, who's got legislative sessions to attend and Donovan Burton's off probably doing something, I'm guessing. So, there's been a concern about, well, how do we schedule these meetings and keep the ball moving forward without overtaxing people's time? But if we sort of had almost like an executive committee or just a group, and it can be open, like if you can attend, you attend, but nonetheless, where it's expected that some of us move a little faster to push the ball forward without feeling like, okay, we got to get everybody at the table every time to have a discussion about every topic, but rather to come back and report and get feedback and evolve from there. But just to move a little more, faster, check some boxes as far as getting good things done. I think from a data standpoint, I think we're very close on, again, getting that team moving faster, but we still, to your point, have conservation and other topics to look seriously at and really come up with what are truly actionable and most bang for our buck, so to speak, solutions. And maybe even some other discussions about regional water planning. Yeah, just to move it faster, that's all. So personally, I'm very interested in that, the idea of there being at least, let's just say almost like something of a subcommittee that's far more consistent, but not just tuned into one topic. It's broader, so we can start, punching out lots of objectives simultaneously.
Other thoughts and comments?
Yeah, let's talk, I mean, that's the part of the next step, to having a final deliverable, tangible report. I mean, we're gonna sit here and somebody's got to sit at a keyboard and begin to craft that or elements of that. And typically, if you get too many authors doing something, the writing style is significantly different. We'll spend as much time editing it as and talking grammar and semantics and tenses as we will writing it. But at the end of the day, we need to create that deliverable. And I'd really like for us to say, here's the skeleton, here's the framework, outline, what we're going to do, how it's going to flow from beginning to end. And that may just be a work session where we sit down and do that. It's about an hour-long work session where we would sit down and do that, and then say, this is what we have, this is what we lack, and let's start putting that thing, the pieces, hang the meat on them, put the bones there and start hanging some meat on it.
Yeah.
We beat up on it after we do that. That's fine. That's how the process ought to work.
Sure.
I think it might be a good idea to get some of that data on the feedback from the customer survey to see what kind of information is being, of what information they like, what they don't, to help identify what targets or what goals or what deliverables we want to see in that report that we want to put on. But I think soon after we get some of that data, at least take a stab, like Tommy said, to put a kind of skeleton together of deliverables we want to see from that report, whether it's recommendations, whether it's questions for the council, whether it's directions. I think that we've got to get something together for that. But for me, it would be beneficial to actually see some of that survey results to help get to the point of putting a little meat on it.
Fair enough.
Well, from the beginning, we've kind of tried to isolate the call, if you will, what it is. What can we do? What should we do with the resources we've been given? And I think everybody anticipates some sort of a report that gives some guidance, something that's hopefully a living document that's got the ability to be moved and changed over the course of time using the modeling and that sort of thing, the internet of water, the other resources that are there that help inform that on a more ongoing basis. But there's some big picture questions. Goals that I felt like we needed to come away with achieving here were a process for conservation tools that's creating access, awareness, maybe an implementation program, like all that is part of a bucket that needs to be addressed. I think, and it's only become more prevalent in my mind, that we need to have a greater understanding of the regional needs and have a greater regional coordination. I think that we're not the only pea in the pod. And I think if we take a silo view of this resource, that will be problematic. So we've talked about it before. I think we're exercising some outreach in that direction, but ultimately we ought to come away with something meaningful that allows us to connect and have sort of a collaborated plan or a plan to have a plan collaboratively across the other providers and users, so that there's something substantive that we can point to and say, this is what we do if this, and this is what they do, and this is how we work together. Because otherwise we're a silo, and everybody's competing for the same resource, and we're going to make assumptions, and other people are going to make assumptions, and pretty soon there's nothing at the bottom of the well but assumptions. And then I think maybe the fourth leg of the stool is the legal implication. That is a living, breathing, moving thing. Larry's been working on discrete issues. I think there are a lot of these that are going to develop, and I think that we need to figure out how that interplays with the other three issues and what tools are necessary and available to both policymakers and those who want policy made. How do you achieve those things? And I think regionally, if we have those relationships, there's value in that because you create a broader base of support. I think there are conservation efforts to some of the points. What can we do from a legal standpoint to implement some of these things without infringing on rights? But let's be smart about how we spend our dollars. So those are the kind of the four things that I think we're tasked with. Obviously, it's subject to be picked apart and pulled apart and put back together, but those are the things that we need to move on in my mind's eye. So some of these there's a long-term play on some of them. The plan will always be augmented, but we still need core work product from a variety of people and then figure out a way to process that and look down the road. But I don't think you can form that plan without assessing the conservation issues and how those are supposed to interplay, the legal issues and how those are supposed to play, and then the regional factors and how we might collaborate with others to accomplish those goals. I think we need all of them. I may be missing things, but these are the fronts I think we need to attack.
I think another key one is going to be education. How does the city educate the constituents on the future of water supply and the implications of that going forward? That's projects, that's regional, that's conservation, it's all those, but how do you educate the constituency on that and the public on that?
That makes good sense.
Well, I mean, the thing with conservation is that, I mean, yeah, there's certainly things to integrate toward a whole plan, but that's obviously, I think we can start to identify discrete strategies that no matter what we're going to use, because conservation is going to be part of the equation anyways. It's not like we're going to find something out that changes whether we're going to go, full tilt with conservation. Yeah.
My thought on it, Ben, is that some of it is process driven. Right now, we have no process. It's all analog.
Fair enough.
Right. So if you don't have some way of making things happen, and maybe that's you create, to Daryl's point, you create a situation where you present to classes once a year, start at an early level, and here's what we want to make sure kids are getting. Maybe it comes out in the electric bill or the water bill or the whatever, and here are our new conservation. What are the tools we're going to use to get this out? And then how do we measure whether it's doing any good or not? But there has to be a process so that you can take these best practices, these best ideas, and put them to use. Otherwise, they're just great stuff to throw up on a website. I mean, and we got to start somewhere. Let's get them. Let's put them on the website. Let's talk about them. Let's figure out what works and what doesn't, what's financially feasible and practical. But then how do we implement them? And not just say, oh yeah, we got a website, but what are we doing? And is that showing results? And I think it's incumbent upon us to come up with sort of an overview of how we think it ought to be put together. And we may not be qualified to fully do that, but I think we at least have to ask the questions, and if we can't answer them, we need to find out who can.
We can at least point in the direction it needs to go.
Yeah.
Well, GBRA has some really good educational programs and actual curriculum written for environmental classes all the way down into elementary school. So speaking for GBRA and Daryl can too, I certainly know we can make that available. Those are tried and true. They may not be the perfect or ultimate thing, but they're certainly a very good tool that's shelf ready to go. And we can begin to utilize it. Cow Creek has some informational pieces. You look at the educational piece, you start young, and that's the generational change that you want to make. Then you look at current activities, and that's the more acute needs. You want to create this higher sensitivity in here. This is shaping how people think. This is shaping how people feel. And you focus on those two things. And I think coming at it from just taking things that are already out there. Then we'll find where we got some gaps, and maybe this, all right, City, you need to develop a piece like this, or maybe we recommend you do an annual water conservation fair, or you continue to work with people to promote xeriscaping and having a xeriscaping fair or whatever. So
Well, I think there's just a ridiculous quantity of tools available to us. We just got to put them all together and sort through what's valuable and what's applicable to our situation. And to Ben's point, we got to kind of get moving on it, because we can sit around and kick the can down the road for another year or 3 years without making substantive progress. So I do see a need for people who are willing to invest a little more time and energy. And if we need to tap additional people to help pinch hit wherever and whenever, well, let's do it. But I don't want to sit up here and spin our wheels and talk about what we might do one day. I'd rather get something accomplished. So, and maybe it's, I like your thoughts on how we put together a plan of attack, whether it's breaking it down to one subcommittee that oversees these things in different buckets, or it's multiple subcommittees and people are in charge of this element of things, and we come back and coordinate. But I'd really like to figure out how we put hands and feet to work a little bit while we're in the gathering of data mode and the analysis mode for the bigger picture. Let's get more stuff to look at and think about, so we can start putting, to your point, Daryl, meat on the bones. And I think it's unfortunately, it takes time. We all only have so much of it. But I think there are some people that are willing to put in some more time. And so I'd be interested in knowing who those folks are. And then if we're light on help, then that's figure out who can help spell and make the difference. A lot of it's just footwork, picking up the phone, making calls, or getting on the internet, pulling resources and bring them back to the group. You can, if we can get that information harvested, we don't have to meet every time. We can publish it to everybody has their say on it, and then pull it down and move on. It doesn't have to be a physical coordination every time, but I do think we need some people that are going to take it under their own volition to go and harvest this information. So,
Patrick, I'll take that bait.
yay.
I've probably got more time than most. Yeah, I wouldn't mind starting a little bit more effort on the conservation piece, pulling together those resources and laying out some strategies and then reporting back to the group, things that might be applicable for us to consider. And so maybe start building some of that chapter together. But,
Okay.
You might want to take a look at some other communities that have good conservation or successful conservation programs and see some of the stuff that they've done. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. If we can.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, especially the free stuff.
That's right.
But, and then there's also the conservation topic. There is a fair amount of public and private grant funding to support those kind of efforts. And so maybe look for some of that stuff that we can steer towards the city or the county or some entity that could utilize those funds.
Well, they're not synonymous. Would you mind if I lumped education in with it, since that's one of the ultimate
Yeah, I think
goals is not just to figure it out, but to figure out how to.
I think
implement
they
it.
go,
Okay.
hand in glove there.
I would be willing to work with you on that.
Okay.
I will share with you the education programs that we have.
Please.
And get you in touch with our education person.
Great. Thanks, Darryl.
Anyone else?
Well,
interested?
obviously, I'm definitely interested. I want there to be some energy to latch on to and to help us move that ball forward. It's every 2 months, this sort of feels dragging to me.
Timely for us as well. So I would be in on that as well with
Okay.
Ben and Tom.
Anyone else? There, we got anybody else on TV? Noticeably silent. All right, let's get started. There's 4 of us. Tom, Ben, Jeff, and I will work on conservation efforts. Tom, you're already heading up this regional water thing.
Yeah, and I'm gonna draft Kurt.
Okay. We look forward to, and I think it's a good first step.
I'm getting the engineers on that.
I think it's a good first step to get the panel down, but really like to see kind of how we come away with it and what are the suggestions of what can we do to make things different than they are. If it's just opening lines of communication, okay, but my guess is that there's more than that available to us. More than just data sharing. There's got to be something else we can do to help allay one another's fear, whether it's collaboration on legal issues or practical issues like looping between systems or whatever. But be good to have the dialogue and see how far it can go. Larry, you're already on top of the legal issue. And that's going to be kind of moment to moment for the next, until session ends. So I don't see an immediate need to do a whole lot more unless you feel like you need some help.
Yes, on the, what we'll call larger type of legal issues, the more immediate type of legal issues are for us to take a look at, as you've talked about, integrating it in with future procurement type of actions, what exists today, where are we going, tying that to potential future inter-regional type of work, which of course there's a procurement aspect to that as well. But the larger state issues, yes, yes. But I think there are some others right now that whenever we take a look at interregional water sources and all, many of these have a procurement aspect. So I would just leave that with y'all just to make sure that that's a data point to at least consider whatever you're discussing, just to see if you believe that there's a procurement aspect and to identify it, and then we can go from there.
All right. Those were, does anybody else have any further discussion on this? All right, I'll summarize what I've got. And we'll circle back to get everybody's time together, and get a little bit more definitive plan. I think Tom is going to kind of head up a group with Ben, Jeff Thompson, and myself to seek out conservation ideas and education issues and start putting together a platform, available options, and means of implementation. Tommy and Kurt are going to work on the regional aspect, further developing those relationships and see how far we can go. Oh, you're going to take turn too. all the engineers. And Larry's going to stay on top of legal, keep us apprised, and then we'll augment that as necessary. Does that sound about right?
Yes. And we'll be sure we reach out to Mark Freiberg and Donovan.
Yeah,
and
good resources.
And the other utilities that are engaged, or that are on the committee, whether they're actively engaged or not.
Right. Well, and I think to Ben's point is, if you make the meeting great, if you don't, great. We got amazing tools with electronic communications, and we can break down work. And we don't have to see each other face to face all the time to get work accomplished. So,
I'll say, I mean, just like to Larry, on the kind of the lone man on the legal front, but there's several of us, myself included, that are normally reading bills and paying attention. It's kind of part of our work with Cow Creek and other things we do. So, Larry, if you need help or something, reach out to us, because we're already doing some of that work and paying attention to bills and analyzing them and looking for implications. So.
and if things come up on your radar, maybe you can send Larry an email and just copy me and anybody else that's interested, and we'll at least know to put it on as a topic on at least on this agenda, if not something else too.
Yeah, especially at Cow Creek, because we're getting an update from our lobbyists on groundwater bills in particular. So,
okay, that's good information. Any other thoughts on this? All right, and Tom, since you volunteered yourself on the landscaping issue that kind of came up here, that seems like a good first effort to how can we identify whatever it is, native plants, that sort of thing, and get the
So does the city already have lists of plants or that, I mean, this is information that you typically put out during the summer anyways, or to new builders or new things. I mean, it's
nurseries and
putting some of this
builders and
stuff up
landscapers.
And where do we have access? You have the city's website, you have a utility website as well.
We do as well, right? So we have to use any of those, and always happy to upgrade, from what the information we already have. If there's new thinking, new plans, new things we want to not push to the community, but make them aware of.
Sure.
And to Tommy's point, now's a good time. It's not quite summer yet, but everything's dead. So if you're going to start over with something that makes sense.
The Unified Development Code has that new recommended plant list.
Very good.
And then the Native Plant Societies, obviously, I've got lists galore, so I can easily flood us with lists. The key is, not to overwhelm everybody and make sure that they're readily available.
Well, if we can, not just on the demand side, but on the supply side,
Exactly.
we can get the local nurseries and that kind of thing and say, hey, look, we anticipate this and obviously would be better if we can get these kind of plants. And I think they'll probably already have that, but maybe we put a flyer up at African Violets or whatever that says, these are the hardy plants that you want to be looking at, because they may or may not get a customer service rep when they go in to buy what they're going to buy. And same thing with home builders. We can say, hey, look, and maybe there are nurseries that want to use this as a business opportunity to get that type of, they'll bring in bulk of some sort that'll help landscapers with a little better price point that helps homeowner and get some of these things in place.
The nurseries were hard hit too, though.
Yeah, they were. So we're gonna have to look kind of far and wide for replacements, no doubt.
Yeah.
So, all right.
Will do.
Thank you, Tom. Anything else for the good of the order?
Well, maybe just to tag on to that, I noticed that the Kendall Soil and Water Conservation District is having a listening session coming up in Waring on the 8th of April. And I thought I'd probably try to get out there for that. We're kind of municipally focused and development focused. Those are folks that are really in contact with the large landowners on the landscape. And a lot of the private wells and systems. So I thought maybe reaching out and trying to draw Amanda, the conservationist, into more of our activity would be something to at least get on their agenda so that they know that what we're doing would complement their work list for next year.
Sounds good. Good. Other thoughts?
Well, I don't know if Mark is still on the call, but Edwards Aquifer Authority, I think, has been doing some projects looking at ways to capture water on the land using things like soils on contours. So they're being very proactive in that. They're probably going to have the models that we can point to for different practices in that regard. Obviously, grazing is another important component. Best grazing practice, but it's also an expensive piece because fencing in this country is not just hard, it's also expensive. So, but yeah, Mark might be worth talking to you about that stuff. They've got some projects that they've installed along Cedar Creek.
You think we could get Bob to do a little video PSA?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah, which ought to replant.
Not
And
for sure.
He could push it on the radio show too. Bob Webster, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, he's on the Cow Creek board and his radio show on KTSA on the weekends. And Bob is incredibly knowledgeable about plants and native plants and that. So you guys would ask him that. I think that'd be a great service. And you can put it on y'all's website. You can stick it up on this website, just a video clip.
And probably the other local radio stations would do as well. I'm sure we could get them to donate 30 seconds to here and there. Maybe even get Bob or somebody else in on one of the morning talk shows. I know they're doing that ranch show now on the local radio station on Saturday mornings and some other things. So I think there's lots of opportunities to get out there.
I'll reach out to him. No problem. Encourage him to do it. And if he needs me to film him, I'll film him. I got the equipment. So no problem.
That sounds good. Anything else? Barrett, anybody out there want to speak further? Okay. All right. We're adjourned. Thanks for your time.
Meeting, folks.
Thank you.
Yeah.